What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and lately, like many of you, I've been enjoying the recently released remake of Resident Evil 4. A game I originally beat on the GameCube, and even back then I considered it to be one of the best games I've ever played. So getting to replay it now with all the modern bells and whistles has been nothing short of sublime. And Capcom lately has been on a remake streak with games like Resi 2 and 3 and now 4. The obvious question going forward is if Resident Evil 5 will be the next in the series to get the remake treatment. But there's a more pressing issue at the heart of this, and that's a question that's plagued Resi 5 since it released. And that is if Resident Evil 5 is racist, and if so, why? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. What made me make this video in the first place was a recent article from thegamer.com who posted this article titled, Resident Evil 5 is too racist for a remake. And as someone who played that game at release, this had me confused. How is Resident Evil 5 any more racist or stereotypical than any other game in the series? The gamer goes on to explain that Resi 5 depicts Africans as savages who are only capable of killing and have no concept of civilized societal morals. They go on to say that Resi 5's legacy is eternally stained by its racism, which is where this article really starts to take off. They say that Resident Evil 5 is racist because you're playing a civilized white man gunning down African people in a remote area of Africa, and I'll stop the article here because this is worth explaining further. I'll just come out and say it. If Resident Evil 5 is racist, then the entire series is as well. In Resident Evil 4, you play as Leon Kennedy, who's on a mission to save the president's daughter from a crazed cult. At first glance, Resi 4 seems to be everything but racist or problematic. But if we take the gaming journalist lens to this game closer, you could condense the entire game into American white man enters Spanish colony and guns down every man and woman in his path. In a similar vein, Resi 4 is like Resi 5. They're about Westerners shooting people of color. To a similar degree, you could also say that Resident Evil 6 is also racist, since the finale of that game for Leon's campaign takes place in China. And the same brain-dead take could be applied here too, with American white man shooting Asian people in their home. However these scenarios could be seen as racist by some, the reality is that Resident Evil as a concept is about survival. And the infected you kill are not really doing it of their own free will, but because they're victims of a maniacal shadow organization that's hell-bent on destroying everything. Killing the Spanish villagers in Resident Evil 4 isn't racist because once the virus takes hold, things like being politically correct or tolerant to cultural traditions get quickly replaced with a you versus them scenario. If Leon were to enter the game and the villagers were just normal non-infected people and Leon decided to start spreading their skulls apart with ammo, then yeah, you could use that argument of white man ruins everything that modern journos are so fond of. But the reality is that in Resi 4's case anyway, the villagers are victims of people like Sadler and the Umbrella Corporation at large. They are not attacking Leon or Ashley because they want to, but because they have no control anymore. They are now slaves to Umbrella. So to flip this back to Resi 5, the same mentality and concepts still apply. It's very clear the moment you enter the village in Resi 5 that something is very clearly wrong with this place. It's not because the inhabitants are African, but that the game is using its opening to set up a feeling that you're being watched from everywhere. You can't shake the feeling that something evil is going to happen. And once that tension hits a point, it explodes and Chris is overrun by infected inhabitants, which is very similar to Resi 4's opening as well. These African villagers are not attacking Chris because they want to, but because they're no longer people anymore. They are like the villagers in 4, they're victims of Umbrella. The unsettling realization that every infected you kill was once a person is integral to the survival horror of Resident Evil at its core. After all, in Resident Evil 7, the Baker family are just like the African or Spanish victims of previous games. They are slaves to Umbrella, the unfortunate byproducts of an organization that sees humanity as nothing but fodder. One of the arguments the gamer as well as articles from around Resident Evil 5's launch make is that Resident Evil 5 depicts Africa as a savage place where modern ideals don't exist. But if we use this same mentality, then Resident Evil 4 is just as bad since, like I said, the game takes place in Spain. Yet if you compare how Resi 4 depicts Spain to the actual region, it's clearly very different as well. Even the most recent Resident Evil Village, which takes place in Romania, depicts that country and its people as cold and murderous. Yet, just like other examples, Romania is more than that as well. Also, Romanians are not werewolves or 9-foot-tall goth mommies. But the argument still stands that these journos saw nothing wrong with Ethan killing people in Village, even though it's exactly the same as previous games. Resident Evil 2 also had a majority of white zombies, and those same people who were mad about Resi 5 are strangely silent about that game. Funny how that works. But anyway, we need to also realize, which these journos conveniently choose not to, is that Resident Evil is a survival horror game. And you can't have an experience like that if the atmosphere and environment don't reflect the direness of the situation. This is why every Resident Evil game pretty much always takes place in some secluded, cut-off region, no matter its country of origin. Resident Evil 4 wouldn't be as dire or intense if Leon could just take a side road and end up at a local bar for a nice steak and a drink. These are survival horror games, they're not soulless Ubisoft open worlds. These journals also complain that Chris's sidekick Sheva is a light-skinned African woman with a British accent. They're mad because she's not dark-skinned and doesn't have the African accent. But if they took 5 minutes, they could easily Google that Sheva was raised in Britain where she was taught special training before returning to Africa. But asking game journals to use their brains is, well, it's a tall order these days. Another argument of thegamer.com is that later on Chris and Sheva end up fighting against native Africans. As in, they're in the African headdresses and bamboo skirts, and this is racist. But the reality is that Africa is an insanely diverse place with tons of tribes with different customs and histories. Like the Hadzabe of Tanzania or the Himba tribes of Namibia. These very primitive groups do exist even to this day, and I think Capcom using tribes like these as enemy types is not racist. It's showcasing how truly evil the Umbrella Corporation is, that they're willing to destroy ancient tribes if it means to further their goals. And shooting them is supposed to fill you with unease, the same way shooting a Spanish woman in Resi 4 should too. These people are victims being placed within an impossible situation where hesitation means death. But what I do find funny is how these same journos who piss and moan about racism, things like Resi 4, don't have a problem with games like Village. In Village, you shoot infected Romanians who are ethnically white. But shooting white infected zombies is fine, of course, because they're white, and white people apparently have no culture, and it's impossible to be racist towards white people. Which is a very racist way of thinking, but that's our modern world these days. Of course, the argument here is that people will say Ethan Winters is white as well, so white people shooting white people is fine. Yet at the same time, if I wanted to use this same brain-dead logic, I could play as Coach in Left 4 Dead 2, who's black, and even there I'm shooting very clearly white zombies. Yet nobody cares, but in that scenario, it's a reverse of Resident Evil 5. So Coach gunning down hundreds, if not thousands, of white infected is fine, but when Chris defends himself in Africa, it's problematic. Make it make sense. You can't, but you can go ahead and try. Why isn't Resident Evil 7 problematic then? I mean, you're killing white people in their own home, but that's completely fine, even though if we take all the modern journals' viewpoints into focus, then Resi 7 depicts Louisiana and its people as insane, bloodthirsty savages as well. When Louisiana is very likely full of good, hardworking, normal people of different skin tones and cultures. The only reason why thegamer.com made this article is because they, like many others, only see and judge people based on the color of their skin. If they see that someone's black, then by definition they believe that they're immediately weaker, they're less likely to succeed, or they're uneducated because they're black. They can't fathom that people of all colors can be good, smart, and extremely capable. especially black people. It's insanely racist to think all black people are beneath you and need you to save them, but that's modern day woke thinking for you. They've been so conditioned by the nonsense within their echo chambers that they pool everyone into specified groups based on surface level things. If you're white, it must mean you're privileged, you come from a good home and have money, even though for many white people it couldn't be further from the truth. And to further solidify what I've been saying this entire time, let's hear from the people behind the game itself. Here's a clip of the original voice actors of Resident Evil 5 responding to the whole racist situation. So here, watch.
It's in Africa. It's been in Antarctica. It's been, I think, in Spain. It's been in the Midwest. It wasn't racist then. Why should it be racist now? It's in Africa. Have fun with the game. Play the game. There are Africans in Africa, but there's other people. You see, in the game, actually, I believe you see some Arabics, some Europeans. They're all running around. They're all in trouble, and they're all in the same boat.
It would be one thing if, they were shooting people who weren't infected or shooting people who weren't, part of this evil. But these are people that are, they have to defend themselves. They are what they are, Majini, infected individuals that are coming to hack you. You should shoot them. Yes. Always shoot the ones that are coming to hack you.
Play the game. They'll see that there's a solid story in there that that's not racist at all, and it's about the setting. The setting's in Africa.
And as you can see, even the actors agree all the way back in the much more normal times of 2009 that Resident Evil 5 is not racist. What really irks me is that thegamer.com says the only way Capcom could remake Resi 5 is by completely reimagining it. They think remaking it as it was would be tone deaf, and entire sections of the game would need to be completely changed for today's, modern audience. And what I hate about this updating for modern audience nonsense that these journos are so hungry for is by updating things, what they really mean is molding it to fit their image. This whole situation reminds me of when journos got triggered by BioShock Infinite, which had plenty of racist undertones, but it was used to service the world, and those racist depictions are there because it's important to the story. Columbia in that game is designed to be a white utopia built upon the slavery of black people. It's a floating city in the sky where rich people quite literally look down on the rest of society from above. And my stance is the same if by some reason Infinite got remade like Resi 5, removing where it takes place or the themes ruins the game and lessens the experience. By this same mentality, any movie including slaves or racism are now racist by nature because they include it. But if we cry and moan at everything that makes us feel uneasy, that's how you end up with products that say and make you feel nothing. I guarantee you, if Capcom remade Resi 5 and set it in Serbia or Italy and just swapped the zombies to white, those same journos would praise it and be like, "Oh, thank you Capcom, wow, you guys are so forward thinking." It's so blatantly biased and gross, and I hate these journos. They add nothing but idiocy to the conversation. The article ends by saying that Capcom shouldn't rely on Resident Evil 5's troubled past to forge its future. And they say that Resi 5's direction is what ruined the franchise, although I would argue it was Resident Evil 6 that did that proper. If there's any game in the series that needs a complete reimagining, it's Resident Evil 6. And it's not because it's set in China or has racist undertones, but because that game was certified butt cheeks and had 3 awful campaigns. Resi 6 tried to make a game for everyone, but ended up making a game for nobody, and it sucked ass because of it. My only real complaints of Resi 5 would be to change the final boss fight and rely less on stupid flashy moments like calling down orbital strikes on infected monsters. Because it's very clear in Resi 5's last 20% or so of its campaign, the game just completely abandons its survival horror angle and becomes a full-blown Hollywood action movie. But I think its setting is what makes Resi 5 interesting and memorable. I would love to see a future Resi game take place in locations we don't see represented enough. Thailand would be interesting, or places like Brazil would be fun too. Actually, Mexico would be really cool since not enough games take place there either. Whatever Capcom does, I hope they don't listen to these modern gaming journos for a second. Because when you do listen to these idiots, that's how franchises like Saints Row get remade into garbage. And it would be such a shame for Capcom to ruin their winning streak with remakes by bending the knee to woke activists who won't even buy their games anyway. If anyone at Capcom happens to watch this video, please, I'm begging you, to never listen to these Western game journalists when it comes to anything. Resident Evil 5 is not racist, neither is any other game in the series, and it's that fearless drive to push buttons and boundaries that makes Resident Evil such a fantastic franchise to begin with. And it would be such a shame to repeat mistakes after spending so long righting those same wrongs. Because remember, when Capcom did listen to Western game journos, that's how Resident Evil 6 became what it was, and look what happened to that game and what it did to the franchise. So in the end, no, Resident Evil is not racist, and I will always stand between those idiots and the people who actually pay for their entertainment. So thank you for watching, subscribe for more, and if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go suplex an infected Spanish lady into the pavement and make lasagna with some cult members' faces in Resident Evil 4 Remake. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.